Hello, and welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Left Behind. Vince Harlow watched as the cloud of dust rose behind his wife's retreating SUV, her laughter still ringing in his ears. The blazing Nevada sun beat down on his face as he stood alone on the desolate stretch of highway, miles from the nearest town. Let's see if your survival skills pay off. Melody had yelled, her blonde hair whipping in the wind as she sped away with her photographer friend Trent. The smirk on Trent's face told Vince everything he needed to know. Vince didn't panic. Instead, he reached into his boot and pulled out a small device, a GPS tracker he'd planted on his own vehicle weeks ago when he first noticed the way Melody's eyes lingered on Trent during their dinner parties. The small screen displayed a blinking dot moving steadily eastward. The desert stretched endlessly around him, shimmering under the brutal heat. To anyone else, this might be a death sentence. But Vince wasn't anyone else. Before founding his high-end survival school, Phantom Ridge Expeditions, Vince had spent 8 years in the Army Rangers, including 3 tours in environments far more hostile than this. The desert was practically his second home. He'd built his reputation and fortune teaching billionaires and celebrities how to survive in it. Melody had been one of his clients 3 years ago, an aspiring adventure influencer looking to boost her following with authentic survival content. She'd been captivating with her quick wit and seemingly genuine interest in his world. Their whirlwind romance had culminated in marriage just 6 months later. Now, it appeared that romance had been as authentic as her social media persona. Vince pulled out his satellite phone, the one Melody didn't know about, and dialed a familiar number. "Dom," he said when the line connected. "It's happening. Are you in position?" "Roger that," came the gruff reply from Dominic Alvarez, his former Ranger teammate and current head of security at Phantom Ridge. "You okay out there, boss?" "Never better," Vince replied, surveying the landscape. She even picked the perfect spot. "We're about 2 miles from Outpost 3. Cold-blooded," Dom commented. "You want me to intercept them?" "No. Follow the plan. Let them think they've won for now. I'll make my way to the outpost and prep everything. You monitor their position and be ready with the chopper when I give the signal." 3 hours later, as the sun began its westward descent, Vince stood atop a rocky outcropping and watched as a sleek black helicopter appeared on the horizon. Right on schedule, he'd spent the time preparing at Outpost 3, one of 5 hidden facilities he maintained throughout the region for his survival courses. This particular outpost was off all official records, known only to him and Dom. The helicopter touched down in a swirl of dust. Dom emerged, his muscular frame silhouetted against the setting sun, carrying a satellite phone. "It's her," Dom said, handing him the device. "Car broke down about 40 miles east of here. She sounds desperate." Vince took the phone, his face revealing nothing as he heard his wife's voice, cracking with fake tears. "Vince? Vince, is that you? Thank God. We're lost. The car broke down, and there's no one around for miles. I'm so sorry, baby. I was just trying to teach you a lesson. Please help us." "I know," Vince replied calmly, his voice devoid of emotion. "I tracked you. Help is coming." "Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry And Melody?" Vince interrupted. "You should know who's coming for you." What do you mean?" Her voice suddenly tense. "Remember Preston Rhodes?" The name hung in the air between them. Preston Rhodes, the ex-military contractor Vince had introduced her to last year. The man who'd become obsessed with Melody, sending her increasingly disturbing messages until Vince had been forced to intervene. The man who'd sworn vengeance on them both. That's not funny, Vince," Melody stammered, her voice suddenly small. "Preston is in prison." "Not anymore," Vince lied smoothly. "He made parole 3 weeks ago. And when I mentioned that my wife might be stranded in his territory, well, he seemed very eager to help." Through the phone, he could hear her panicked breathing. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I? I guess you'll find out soon enough." Vince ended the call and turned to Dom, whose eyebrows had shot up. "Rhodes? Man, that's cold. She'll be terrified." "Good," Vince replied, his eyes hard as the desert stones beneath his feet. "Fear is the beginning of wisdom." and she has a lot to learn. What Melody didn't know was that Preston Rhodes was indeed still in prison. But the fear he'd just planted would be just the first step in his carefully orchestrated plan, a plan he'd been developing for months as he gathered evidence of his wife's betrayal. "Let's move," Vince said, checking his watch. "We have work to do." Chapter 2: The Spider's Web. 6 months earlier, Vince sat in his home office, staring at the screen of Melody's tablet. She had left it behind when rushing to an emergency photo shoot with Trent. The tablet she'd asked him not to touch because it contained surprise anniversary plans. The same tablet that had just received a message that flashed across the screen before disappearing. "When are you telling him? We can't keep waiting forever. I need you. All of you." Something in Vince's gut tightened. The message was gone in an instant, but the sender's name had been clear: Trent Westlake, the ruggedly handsome adventure photographer who'd been hanging around Melody for the past few months, supposedly collaborating on her social media presence. Vince didn't immediately confront her. That wasn't his style. Instead, he began watching, observing, planning. He hired a private investigator who documented dozens of meetings between Melody and Trent at a luxury hotel on the outskirts of Vegas. He installed hidden cameras in their home, capturing whispered late-night phone calls when she thought he was asleep. He documented every lie, every deception, every betrayal. But the true nature of their plot only became clear when he hacked into Melody's private email account and discovered correspondence with his company's attorney discussing the contingency plans for transferring ownership of Phantom Ridge Expeditions in the event of Vince's unfortunate accident. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to kill him. That night, Vince made a phone call to someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Faye, it's me." His sister's voice was thick with sleep, but instantly alert. "Vince? Is everything okay?" "It's 3 in the morning. You were right about her," he said simply. A long pause followed. Faye had warned him about Melody from the beginning, sensing something performative in her affection. That warning had caused a rift between them that had lasted years. "I'm so sorry, Vince," she finally said. "What happened?" "It's worse than you thought. I need your help." In the weeks that followed, Vince and Faye reconnected as they built his counter-strategy. Faye, with her background in cybersecurity, helped him secure his finances and business holdings, creating a complex web of protections that would activate the moment anyone tried to transfer ownership of Phantom Ridge. Meanwhile, Vince continued playing the role of the oblivious husband, even as he methodically prepared for every contingency. He deployed GPS trackers, installed backdoor access to their vehicle's computer systems, and established a network of hidden caches and safe houses throughout the desert region where he operated. He noted how Melody began suggesting they take more adventurous trips together, always in remote locations with treacherous terrain. He cataloged how she began asking detailed questions about his will and life insurance. And he observed how Trent kept appearing at their social events, his eyes following Melody with barely concealed hunger. "Why are you going along with this wilderness trip if you know what they're planning?" Faye asked him over an encrypted call the night before he was due to leave with Melody. "Because I need to catch them in the act," Vince explained. "If I confront her now, she'll just deny everything. I need irrefutable evidence." "This is dangerous, Vince. They could actually kill you." "They could try," he replied, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that reminded Faye of their father. "But I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes, and neither do I." Now, as he stood at Outpost 3 preparing his equipment, Vince reflected on how perfectly his wife and her lover had played into his hands. They had chosen this specific route because Vince had casually mentioned it contained some of the most dangerous and isolated terrain in his territory. They had no idea he maintained a hidden facility there, fully stocked with everything he would need. "Dom," he said as his friend finished securing the helicopter, "make sure the cameras are operational. I want every moment of this recorded." "Already done," Dom confirmed. "Are you sure you don't want me to just bring them in? Let the authorities handle this." Vince checked the edge on his tactical knife before returning it to its sheath. The authorities would give them a trial. "I have something else in mind." He pulled up the tracker's display, showing Melody and Trent's location. The dot was stationary now, exactly where their vehicle had supposedly broken down. In reality, Vince had remotely triggered a kill switch in the SUV's computer system, rendering it completely inoperable. "It's time," he said, his face hard as the desert stone. "Let them stew for another hour, then move in with the chopper. Tell them I sent you to rescue them. Bring them to Outpost 5. Not here. No, I've prepared something special at 5. Dom nodded, knowing better than to ask for details. In their Ranger days, Vince had been legendary for his psychological warfare tactics against captured enemies. Whatever he had planned for Melody and Trent, Dom almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Chapter 3, Mirage. The sun had nearly set by the time Dom's helicopter appeared on the horizon. Melody Harlow stood beside the disabled SUV. Her once perfect makeup streaked with tears, her designer adventure were coated with a fine layer of dust. Beside her, Trent Westlake paced nervously, constantly checking his phone despite the absence of signal. "He's coming," Melody said, relief flooding her voice as she spotted the approaching aircraft. "I told you Vince would help us." Trent snorted. "After you abandoned him in the desert? He's probably bringing the police." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "Vince would never involve authorities. Bad publicity for his precious company." She paused, her expression darkening, though he did say something strange about Preston Rhodes. "Who? Never mind," she said, waving dismissively. "Just let me do the talking. Vince still loves me. I can handle him." The helicopter touched down 50 yards away, sending swirls of sand in all directions. Melody plastered on her most remorseful expression as Dom emerged and approached them. "Mrs. Harlow," he shouted over the whirring blades. "I'm here to extract you. Mr. Harlow sent me." "Where is Vince?" she asked, looking past Dom toward the helicopter. "Handling preparations at the outpost," Dom replied vaguely. "We need to move. Storm's coming in." The sky above was perfectly clear, but neither Melody nor Trent possessed the desert knowledge to challenge this assessment. They gathered their essentials and followed Dom to the helicopter. "Where are we going?" Trent asked as they lifted off. "Secure location," Dom answered, his voice neutral. "Mr. Harlow's orders." Melody exchanged a nervous glance with Trent. This wasn't proceeding according to their plan. Vince was supposed to be devastated, desperate to reconnect with her after her teaching him a lesson. Instead, he was dispatching employees and making mysterious preparations. As the helicopter flew deeper into the desert, Melody tried to orient herself, but the featureless landscape offered few landmarks. After 20 minutes, a small compound appeared below them, a series of partially subterranean structures built into the side of a rocky hill. "What is this place?" she asked as they descended. "Outpost 5, Dom replied. "One of Mr. Harlow's private facilities." The helicopter landed on a small pad at the edge of the compound. Dom escorted them inside, where the temperature was a blessed reprieve from the desert heat. The interior was Spartan but well-equipped. Sleeping quarters, a kitchen area, communications equipment, and various survival gear lining the walls. "Make yourselves comfortable," Dom said, gesturing to the main living area. "Mr. Harlow will be here soon." "When?" Melody demanded. "When he's ready." Dom's tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate further. "There's food in the kitchen, water in the cooler. The bathroom is through that door. Do not attempt to leave the facility. The desert will kill you faster than you can imagine." With that, he turned and left, the sound of the helicopter's engines spooling up moments later. "I don't like this," Trent muttered once they were alone. "This wasn't the plan." "Plans change," Melody hissed. "We can adapt. You said he'd be desperate to get you back, that we'd have the perfect opportunity to stage the accident at the rescue point. This doesn't feel like a man who's desperate for anything." Melody paced the room, her mind racing. Something was wrong. Vince wasn't following the script she'd carefully crafted. The mention of Preston Rhodes continued to unnerve her. "We need to get out of here," Trent decided, moving toward the communications console. "Call for another ride." He pressed several buttons, but the equipment remained dark. "It's dead," he reported. "Or disabled." Melody pulled out her phone. Still no signal. She moved to the door Dom had exited through, only to find it locked. "What the hell?" A sudden crackle came from speakers mounted in the ceiling, followed by Vince's voice, calm and measured. "Hello, Melody. Trent, I hope you're finding Outpost 5 comfortable." Melody whirled, searching for cameras but seeing none. "Vince? What's going on? Where are you?" "I'm exactly where you left me," he replied. "But don't worry about me. I'm quite comfortable. More importantly, I'm exactly where I need to be." "Baby, I'm so sorry about what happened," Melody began, her voice taking on the contrite tone she'd rehearsed. "It was a stupid joke that went too far. Trent and I were just planning my disappearance." Vince interrupted, his voice hardening. "Staging an accident so you could claim my company? Or were you referring to the affair you've been having for the past 8 months? The blood drained from Melody's face. Beside her, Trent stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she tried, but her voice lacked conviction. "The fascinating thing about the desert," Vince continued as if she hadn't spoken, "is how it strips away pretense. Out here, there's no audience to perform for, no followers to impress, just the brutal truth of who you really are and what you're capable of." A hidden panel on the wall slid open, revealing a screen that flickered to life. On it appeared photos of Melody and Trent together in various compromising positions, followed by screenshots of emails discussing Phantom Ridge's ownership transfer after the unfortunate incident. "You've been spying on me?" Melody gasped, outrage replacing her fear. "I prefer to think of it as gathering intelligence on hostile forces," Vince replied, "a skill I learned long before we met." "What do you want?" Trent asked, speaking directly to the ceiling. "What I want," Vince said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is for you both to experience the desert as I have, to understand its power, its justice. Over the next few days, I'm going to give you a personalized survival course, one you'll never forget." The lights in the facility suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. Lesson 1. Vince's voice came through the darkness. Begins now. Chapter 4. Prey. Trent Westlake awoke to darkness and the taste of blood in his mouth. His head throbbed where he'd struck it when the lights went out, and some kind of gas had filled the room, rendering both him and Melody unconscious. Now, as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he realized he was no longer in the outpost facility. He was outside, lying on hard-packed desert sand under a star-filled sky. A few yards away, Melody was stirring, groaning as she regained consciousness. "Melody," he whispered urgently. "Wake up." She rolled over, disoriented. "What? Where are we?" "I don't know, but we're not in the outpost anymore." They both struggled to their feet, taking inventory. Their phones were gone, as were their watches and belts. They wore only the clothes they'd had on when the helicopter picked them up. Between them, they found a single canteen of water, a compass, and a sealed envelope. Melody tore open the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten note. "Welcome to Survival Experience, Advanced Course. You are approximately 15 miles from the nearest road. The compass will point you toward it. The water, if rationed properly, will last one person about 24 hours. 2 people, considerably less. Choose wisely." "V, that bastard," Melody hissed. "He left us out here to die." Trent grabbed the compass, trying to orient himself in the darkness. "Maybe not. If we start walking now, while it's cool, we could cover significant ground before sunrise." "And then what? Wander until we die of dehydration?" "You took our phones." "It's better than sitting here," Trent argued. "Look, we just need to." He froze as a sound reached them from somewhere in the darkness. A low, rumbling growl. "What was that?" Melody whispered, instinctively moving closer to Trent. "I don't know. Coyote maybe." But even as he said it, Trent knew that sound was too deep, too menacing for a coyote. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the distinctive sound of padded feet on sand. "Run!" Trent shouted, grabbing Melody's arm and pulling her into motion. They sprinted across the desert floor, their feet slipping on loose sand, their breath coming in panicked gasps. Behind them, the growling creature gave chase, gaining ground with each passing second. "Up there!" Melody pointed to a rocky outcropping. "We can climb." They scrambled up the rocks, cutting their hands on sharp edges in their desperate ascent. Below them, a large shape paced, its eyes reflecting the moonlight. It wasn't a coyote. It was much larger. A mountain lion. How the hell is there a mountain lion out here? Trent gasped, pressing himself against the rock face. Vince, Melody said, her voice bitter. This is his doing. Somehow, they remained on the rocks for hours, watching the predator circle below. It was nearly dawn when the animal finally lost interest and padded away into the desert. We need to move, Trent said, checking the compass. Before it gets hot. As they made their way across the increasingly hostile landscape, the sun rose mercilessly, heating the air to unbearable temperatures. Their progress slowed to a desperate crawl, their single canteen of water depleting rapidly. We're not going to make it, Melody said around midday, collapsing onto the sand. 15 miles? In this heat? It's a death sentence. Keep moving, Trent insisted, pulling her up. Vince is watching us somehow. I'm sure of it. We can't let him win. Win? This isn't a game, Trent. He's trying to kill us. If he wanted us dead, we'd be dead already, Trent reasoned. This is psychological. He's trying to break us. As if on cue, a sound cut through the shimmering heat, the distant whop 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 of helicopter blades. They turned to see a black dot approaching from the east. Help! Melody screamed, waving her arms frantically. Here! We're here! The helicopter drew closer, hovering 100 feet above them. It was Dom's aircraft. Through the windshield, they could see Vince himself at the controls, watching them with cold detachment. He made no move to land. Instead, a package dropped from the helicopter, landing in the sand near them. Then the aircraft banked away, disappearing back toward the horizon. Trent reached the package first, tearing it open. Inside was a satellite phone, a fresh canteen of water, and another note. Enjoying the course so far? You've completed the first trial, wildlife encounter, and basic navigation. The phone has one number programmed. Mine. Call when you're ready to confess. Until then, consider this your chance to experience what it's like to be left behind by someone you trusted. I'll be watching. V. Melody grabbed the phone, immediately hitting the call button. Vince answered on the first ring. Already? That was fast. You're insane, she screamed into the receiver. You could have killed us. Strange accusation coming from you, he replied calmly, especially given what I found on your laptop. The detailed plans for my accident on our upcoming climbing expedition. The life insurance policy you took out on me. The consulting you did with that park ranger about disappearance scenarios in remote locations. Melody went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Save it. I've seen it all. Heard it all. I know exactly what you and Trent planned. Fine, she hissed. So what? You can't prove anything. All you're doing now is giving me evidence for a restraining order when I get back. Vince's laugh was cold. Who says you're getting back? The course has just begun, Melody. You have 2 more trials to complete. Besides, you might want to consider your situation more carefully before threatening me. What do you mean? Have you asked Trent about Kylie Porter yet? The name hit Melody like a physical blow. What about her? Ask him, Vince said simply. Then call me back when you're ready to hear my terms. The line went dead. Melody turned to Trent, who had been drinking desperately from the fresh canteen. Who's Kylie Porter? She demanded. Trent's expression closed off immediately. No one. He's trying to divide us. Mind games. Don't lie to me. Melody stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Vince wouldn't have mentioned her without a reason. Who is she? For a long moment, Trent said nothing. Then, Wesley Porter's sister. The name struck Melody like a slap. Wesley Porter had been one of Vince's clients last year, a wealthy tech entrepreneur who had died in a climbing accident during an expedition. An expedition that Trent had photographed. An expedition that Melody had helped plan. What about her? Melody asked, though something in her expression suggested she already knew. She's been investigating her brother's death, Trent admitted. She doesn't believe it was an accident. And she's been asking questions about the equipment, about the route changes, about you. Melody's face hardened. You told me you handled that. You said there would be no connection to us. I thought I had. Trent protested. But she's persistent. And she's found something, I don't know what. She contacted me last month, said she had proof. And you didn't think to mention this to me? Melody's voice rose dangerously. I was handling it. Like you handled this desert fiasco? She gestured wildly around them. You said Vince would be helpless out here, that he'd never suspect us. Well, he not only suspected us, he's been 10 steps ahead this whole time. Their argument was interrupted by a sound in the distance. Engines. Multiple engines, growing louder. Someone's coming, Trent said, relief flooding his face. Maybe park rangers? But as the vehicles crested a nearby dune, Melody's expression turned to horror. There were 3 dirt bikes, and riding the lead bike was a man she recognized immediately. Preston Rhodes, the ex-military contractor who had stalked her the previous year. No, she whispered. Vince said he was in prison. Who is that? Trent demanded, seeing her reaction. We need to run. Now. But there was nowhere to run in the open desert. The dirt bikes quickly surrounded them, kicking up clouds of dust. Preston dismounted, removing his helmet to reveal a scarred face and cold, predatory eyes. Mrs. Harlow, he said, his voice eerily polite. Mr. Harlow sends his regards. Chapter 5, Predators. Preston Rhodes circled Melody and Trent like a shark scenting blood. His companions remained on their dirt bikes, engines idling, forming a loose perimeter around them. I've been looking forward to this reunion, Preston said, his voice carrying the artificial pleasantness of a predator toying with its prey. Ever since you filed those false harassment claims against me. They weren't false, Melody shot back, though her voice trembled. You were stalking me. Preston laughed, a harsh sound in the desert stillness. You flirted with me for weeks, led me on, then cried harassment when your husband found out. Classic Melody. What do you want? Trent interjected, trying to sound braver than he felt. Me? I'm just the transportation. Preston gestured to the dirt bikes. Mr. Harlow was quite specific about where to take you for the next phase of your education. Melody's eyes narrowed. Vince put you up to this? I thought you hated him too. Let's just say we found common ground. Preston replied, cryptically. Now, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the enjoyable way. His hand drifted to a stun baton at his hip. Your choice. 30 minutes later, Melody and Trent found themselves being escorted into a cave complex cut into the side of a rocky hill. Unlike the modern comfort of Outpost 5, this place was primitive, illuminated only by battery-powered lanterns that cast long shadows across the rough stone walls. Preston led them to a central chamber where a table had been set up. On it lay several items, 2 backpacks, some climbing gear, and a tablet computer. Welcome to Trial 2, Preston announced, gesturing grandly. Mr. Harlow prepared this specially for you. The tablet screen flickered to life, showing Vince's face. Unlike his previous cold demeanor, he now wore an unsettling smile. I see you've met my associate, he said through the screen. Preston was kind enough to assist me when I explained the situation. Turns out, he's not particularly fond of people who manipulate others and then discard them. Vince, please, Melody began. This has gone far enough. We can talk about this. We're well past talking, Vince cut her off. Now it's time for demonstration. You see, while you were planning my unfortunate accident, I was documenting everything. Every conversation, every email, every meeting with Trent, including, he paused meaningfully, your discussions about Wesley Porter. Trent surged forward. You don't know anything about Porter, don't I? Vince's expression hardened. I know you tampered with his climbing gear after Melody convinced him to take an unauthorized route. I know you both collected on the promotional deal with his company after his tragic accident. And I know Kylie Porter has been assembling evidence against you both for months. Melody's face had gone ashen. That's not what happened. Save it for someone who hasn't heard you laughing about it on recorded video, Vince replied coldly. Now, here's what's going to happen. Those backpacks contain supplies for 24 hours. Preston is going to escort you to a specific location. Your task is simple. Survive until extraction. And if we refuse, Trent challenged. Then Preston delivers you and all my evidence to Kylie Porter, Vince answered simply. Your choice. Melody and Trent exchanged glances. They both knew they had no real option. Fine, Melody finally said. What's the catch? Vince's smile returned. So perceptive. The catch is that the location is the same area where Wesley Porter died. I thought fitting. And one more thing. You'll need to trust each other completely to survive. Good luck with that. The screen went dark. Preston gestured to the backpacks. Shall we? It's a 2-hour ride, and the sun's not getting any cooler. The journey through the desert on the back of the dirt bikes was brutal. By the time they reached their destination, a steep cliff face with a precarious path winding up its side, Melody and Trent were exhausted, dehydrated, and increasingly hostile toward each other. This is it, Preston announced, bringing his bike to a stop. Home sweet home. The site was familiar to both of them. The same remote climbing location where Wesley Porter had fallen to his death 14 months earlier. The memory of that day hung between them like a ghost. Your task, Preston explained, handing them each a backpack, is to climb to the shelter at the top before nightfall. Everything you need is in these packs. Mr. Harlow was very specific about the contents. And tomorrow? Melody asked, eyeing the imposing cliff warily. If you make it through the night, I'll return with extraction at noon. Preston mounted his bike again. Oh, and one more thing. There's only enough water for one of you. Mr. Harlow said to tell you, choose better than I did when I chose you. With that, he and his companions roared away, leaving Melody and Trent alone at the base of the cliff. This is insane, Trent muttered, opening his backpack. Inside, he found climbing gear, some protein bars, a thin blanket, and an empty water bottle. Where's the water? Melody checked her own pack and found a single large canteen, nearly full. I have it. Trent's eyes locked on the container. We'll share it. Like hell we will, she snapped, clutching the canteen protectively. You heard what Preston said. There's only enough for one. So what? You're just going to let me die of dehydration? After what you just revealed about Kylie Porter, I'm considering it. Their argument escalated as the afternoon wore on, both aware that the climbing would become impossible once darkness fell. Finally, operating in tense silence, they began their ascent. Halfway up the cliff face, secured by ropes to a narrow ledge, Trent made his move. While Melody was focused on securing her next handhold, he lunged for the canteen attached to her belt. What are you doing? She cried as they grappled precariously on the ledge. The canteen slipped from both their grasp, tumbling down the cliff face before smashing on the rocks below. Look what you did, Trent shouted, his face contorted with rage and fear. What I did? You tried to steal it. Their shouting match was interrupted by a sound from above, a slow, mocking applause. They looked up to see Vince sitting calmly at the cliff's edge, watching them. Bravo, he called down. You lasted longer than I expected before turning on each other. Vince, Melody called, her anger temporarily redirected. This is attempted murder. You can't do this. Actually, this is a private expedition that you both voluntarily joined, he replied. I have the waivers with your signatures. And as for the water, he held up a canteen of his own. There's plenty up here. All you have to do is finish the climb. The sun was setting fast, painting the desert in crimson and gold. Darkness would make the climb nearly impossible, and without water, they wouldn't survive the night exposed on the cliff. We don't have a choice, Trent muttered. We have to keep going. Working in bitter silence, they continued their ascent. As the last light faded, they finally pulled themselves over the edge onto a small plateau. There, they found a rudimentary shelter, little more than a lean-to with sleeping mats, and Vince sitting beside a small campfire. Congratulations, he said, not looking up from the flames. You've completed trial 2. Enough games, Trent snarled, stepping toward Vince. This ends now. With surprising speed, Vince was on his feet, a hunting knife appearing in his hand. I wouldn't, he said softly. The deadly calm in his voice stopped Trent cold. Vince tossed them each a canteen of water. Drink. Rest. You'll need your strength for tomorrow. Why are you doing this? Melody asked, her voice hoarse from exertion and thirst. If you know everything, why not just go to the police? Because the legal system is too merciful for what you've done, Vince answered, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Wesley Porter was my friend before he was your victim. He trusted me to keep him safe, and through you, I failed him. He turned his gaze directly to Melody. And you betrayed not just me, but everything I built. Everything I am. So what happens now? Trent asked, sinking to the ground in exhaustion. Now, Vince smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Now we wait for our guest. What guest? Melody demanded. As if in answer, the sound of an approaching helicopter cut through the night air. Minutes later, a tall, slender woman with Porter's same chestnut hair and determined jawline emerged from the darkness and stepped into the circle of firelight. Hello, Melody. Trent. Kylie Porter's voice was hard as steel. We have a lot to talk about. Chapter 6, Confession. Kylie Porter's presence changed everything. She moved with the precise confidence of someone who had been planning this confrontation for a long time, her eyes never leaving Melody and Trent as she took a seat beside Vince at the fire. I've imagined this moment for 14 months, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly simmering beneath the surface. 14 months of nightmares about how my brother died. 14 months of being told it was just a tragic accident. It was an accident, Trent insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. The equipment failed. The equipment was tampered with, Kylie countered. And now I have proof. She nodded to Vince, who produced a tablet and passed it to her. Kylie turned the screen toward them. On it played a video, security footage from what appeared to be the equipment room at Phantom Ridge Expeditions the night before Wesley Porter's fatal climb. The footage clearly showed Trent entering the room alone, examining Porter's climbing gear and making subtle adjustments to the carabiners and rope connections. Where did you get this? Trent whispered, his face draining of color. Vince maintains cameras in all equipment areas, Kylie answered. Standard safety protocol. He just never had reason to review this particular footage until I started asking questions. That proves nothing, Melody interjected, though her voice trembled slightly. Regular equipment checks are normal. At 3 a.m? Without logging the inspection? Kylie shook her head. And that's just the beginning. I also have your emails discussing the modified route you suggested to Wesley. The route that took him along that unstable ledge. The route that wasn't in Vince's approved expedition plan. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, casting flickering shadows across the tense faces around it. Why? Kylie finally asked, the single word laden with pain. Why my brother? Melody and Trent exchanged glances, each clearly waiting for the other to speak first. Finally, Trent broke. It wasn't supposed to be fatal, he said, his shoulders slumping. Just enough of an accident to generate publicity. Wesley agreed to it. Liar. Kylie lunged forward, but Vince caught her arm, holding her back. Let him finish, Vince said quietly. I want to hear this. Trent swallowed hard. Wesley's company was launching their new outdoor gear line. He wanted dramatic publicity for the launch, something that would show the gear saving lives in extreme circumstances. We planned a controlled accident, a close call that I would capture on camera. The gear would perform heroically, Wesley would be safe, and everyone would benefit from the publicity. So what went wrong? Vince asked, his voice dangerously soft. The ledge was more unstable than we anticipated, Trent continued. When he put his weight on it, it gave way completely instead of just cracking like we planned. The safety equipment should have held, but he trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. But you modified it too much, Vince finished for him. You weakened it past the safety threshold. Trent didn't deny it. After it happened, we had a choice. Admit to staging a publicity stunt that went horribly wrong, or let it appear as a tragic, genuine accident. Kylie prompted, her gaze shifting to Melody. Melody's composure finally cracked. Fine. Yes, I knew about the plan. I helped coordinate it, but never thought anyone would get hurt, let alone killed. And afterwards, Vince asked, when you collected on the promotional deal with his company, when you used his death to boost your social media following with your heartfelt posts about losing a dear friend? That was opportunistic, not malicious, Melody defended weakly. We couldn't undo what happened. No, Kylie agreed, her voice tight with controlled fury. You couldn't bring my brother back, but you could have told the truth. You could have given my family closure instead of lies. The night grew colder as the conversation continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Kylie produced more evidence, text messages, promotional contracts signed after Wesley's death, social media analytics showing how Melody's following had surged in the aftermath of the tragedy. By dawn, the full picture had emerged, an elaborate publicity stunt gone wrong, followed by a calculated cover-up, all motivated by fame and money. Throughout the night, Vince had said little, just watched as Kylie methodically dismantled Melody and Trent's denials with relentless evidence. As the first light of morning painted the eastern sky, Vince finally spoke again. "Trial 3 begins now," he announced, rising to his feet. "Your final test. Haven't we been through enough?" Melody pleaded, her face streaked with tears from the night's revelations. "Not nearly," Vince replied coldly. "This trial is simple. Confession." He produced a professional video camera and set it up on a tripod facing them. "You will record complete confessions. Everything about Wesley Porter. Everything about your plan for my accident. Every detail. No omissions. And if we refuse," Trent challenged, though his defiance had diminished considerably since the previous day. "Then this evidence goes to the authorities today," Kylie answered. "All of it, including the new material from your conversations last night, which Vince has been recording. And if we confess," Melody asked quietly. "Then we have leverage," Vince explained. "Insurance that ensures you'll do exactly as instructed moving forward." "What do you want?" Trent asked. "First, you'll both sign documents transferring any and all claims to Phantom Ridge Expeditions to me exclusively," Vince began. "Then, you'll resign from your positions and publicly disassociate from Wesley's company. Finally, you'll make restitution to Kylie and the Porter family, 7 figures each minimum." "That would ruin us," Melody protested. "As opposed to prison," Kylie countered. "Because that's the alternative." The choice was clear, though hardly a choice at all. One by one, they sat before the camera and confessed everything. When it was done, Vince collected signed documents that Kylie produced from her briefcase. Legal forms prepared in advance by attorneys that effectively stripped Melody and Trent of any claim to Vince's company and assets, while establishing substantial financial restitution to the Porter family. "Are we done now?" Melody asked when the paperwork was complete, her voice hollow. "Almost," Vince replied, checking his watch. "Preston should be arriving soon for extraction." "And then what?" Trent asked. "And then you disappear," Vince said simply. "Both of you. New identities. New locations. Neither of you ever contacts me or the Porter family again." "You're forcing us into exile?" Melody gasped. "I'm giving you a chance to avoid prison," Vince corrected. "Which is more than you planned to give me. More than you gave Wesley." The sound of approaching dirt bikes signaled Preston's arrival. As they gathered their few belongings, Melody made one last attempt to reach Vince. "I did love you once," she said quietly. "In the beginning." Vince looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "No, Melody. You loved what I represented. Success, security, status. You never loved me. You turned away. And I won't make that mistake again." Preston and his companions arrived, ready to transport Melody and Trent back to civilization, or what would be left of it for them after Vince's retribution was complete. As they prepared to depart, Kylie approached Vince, speaking quietly so the others couldn't hear. "Thank you," she said simply, "for helping me get justice for Wesley." Vince nodded, his expression softening slightly for the first time in days. He deserved better than what happened to him. "What you did here," Kylie hesitated. "It was extreme, but necessary. Sometimes the desert is the only place where true justice can be found," Vince replied. "Out here, there's nowhere to hide from who you really are." As Preston led Melody and Trent away, Vince stood with Kylie at the cliff's edge, watching the sunrise fully illuminate the vast, unforgiving landscape that had been both his home and his weapon of retribution. The desert had revealed its truth, as it always did, and Vince Harlow had proven himself its most dedicated disciple. Chapter 7. Aftermath. 6 weeks after the desert ordeal, Vince sat in the expansive office of Phantom Ridge Expeditions, reviewing the quarterly reports. Business was booming, ironically bolstered by the mysterious disappearance of Melody Harlow and Trent Westlake from public life. The speculation had created a surge of interest in the company, even as Vince maintained a stoic silence about his estranged wife's whereabouts. The official story, carefully constructed and disseminated through proper channels, was that Melody and Trent had embarked on a private expedition to remote international locations for an exclusive documentary project. Few questioned it. Those who did received politely vague responses from Phantom Ridge's PR team. The reality was considerably different. Following their confessions, Melody and Trent had been transported to separate locations. Their assets had been liquidated to pay restitution to the Porter family. Their social media accounts, once their lifeblood, had gone dormant. For all practical purposes, they had ceased to exist in their previous forms. A knock at the door interrupted Vince's thoughts. His assistant ushered in Faye, whose expression was tense despite her attempt at a casual greeting. "Have you seen this?" she asked without preamble, sliding a tablet across his desk. On the screen was a news article about a private investigator hired by Melody's parents, who had grown concerned about their daughter's extended absence. The investigator was asking pointed questions about Phantom Ridge and Vince's last interactions with his wife. "It was inevitable," Vince said, pushing the tablet back toward Faye. "But it changes nothing. The confessions and legal documents protect us." "Us?" Faye raised an eyebrow. "Vince, I helped you expose her betrayal. I didn't sign up for whatever happened out in that desert." "Nothing happened that they didn't deserve," Vince replied evenly. "And nothing that can be proven." Faye studied her brother's face, searching for something. Remorse, perhaps, or concern. She found neither. "You've changed," she finally said. "The Vince I knew wouldn't have been so cold." "The Vince you knew died the moment he discovered his wife was planning his murder," he replied, his voice hardening. "But enough about that. What's the status on the Porter settlement?" Faye recognized the deflection, but allowed it. "Final payments were transferred yesterday. Kylie has officially withdrawn all legal inquiries into Wesley's death." "Good." Vince nodded, then glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting with the board in 20 minutes. Anything else?" Faye hesitated, then decided to press forward. Dom called. "He's concerned about Preston Rhodes." This caught Vince's attention. "What about him?" "Apparently, Preston's been talking. Nothing specific yet, but Dom thinks he might be testing the waters, seeing what his information might be worth to the right buyer." A shadow crossed Vince's features. "I'll handle Preston. Like you handle Melody and Trent?" Faye challenged. "If necessary," Vince replied without elaboration. "Now, if there's nothing else." The dismissal was clear. Faye rose, pausing at the door. "Just be careful, Vince. Revenge changes people, sometimes into someone they never wanted to be." After she left, Vince sat in silence for several minutes, her words echoing in his mind. Then he reached for his phone and dialed a number from memory. "It's me," he said when the line connected. "We need to meet. Tonight. The usual place." He listened briefly, then added, "Yes, it's about Preston. He's becoming a problem." That evening, Vince drove to an isolated diner on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that catered to truckers and others seeking anonymity. In a back booth, a heavy-set man with a weathered face and calculating eyes waited. "Oscar," Vince acknowledged as he slid into the seat opposite. "Oscar Harlow." Vince's estranged father nodded in return. "Son, been a while." The similarities between them were subtle but unmistakable. The same watchful gaze, the same economy of movement, the same aura of controlled danger. "Preston Rhodes is talking," Vince said without preamble. "About the desert." Oscar took a sip of his coffee, seemingly unconcerned. "Not surprising. Men like Preston always talk eventually. The question is, what do you want to do about it? That depends on what you know about him." A thin smile crossed Oscar's face. "I know everyone with a certain skill set in this region, Preston included. He has a weakness." "I'm listening." As Oscar detailed Preston's vulnerabilities, his gambling debts, his ex-wife who still held leverage over him, his probation conditions that could easily be violated, Vince was reminded why he had reluctantly reached out to his father despite their troubled history. Oscar Harlow had connections in the darker corners of society that even Vince, with his military background, couldn't access. Handling Preston is simple, Oscar concluded. The question is whether it's worth the cost. What cost? Reconnecting with me, Oscar replied bluntly. I help with this, you stop shutting me out. Families should stick together, especially after what happened with that wife of yours. Vince's expression hardened. How much do you know about that? Enough to know you finally put my teachings to good use, Oscar said, a hint of pride in his voice. The desert justice. Using people's weaknesses against them. That was all straight from my playbook. The realization struck Vince with unexpected force. In exacting his revenge, he had indeed employed the very tactics his father had used throughout his criminal career. Tactics Vince had once despised. I'm not like you, he said coldly. No, Oscar laughed. Then why am I here? Why are we discussing how to silence a potential witness? Face it, son. The apple didn't fall far from the tree after all. Before Vince could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Dom. Roads on the move. Headed to local news station. ETA, 30 minutes. Decision time, Oscar said, noting the change in Vince's expression. Are we family again or not? Vince stood abruptly. Handle Preston. Your way. But this doesn't make us family. It's a start, Oscar replied with a satisfied smile. I'll be in touch about my payment. As Vince left the diner, he felt a familiar darkness settling over him. The same darkness that had guided him through the desert ordeal with Melody and Trent. The same darkness that had allowed him to orchestrate their systematic breaking. His phone rang. Kylie Porter. Vince? I just got a strange call from a man named Preston Rhodes. He wants to meet. Says he has information about Wesley's case that I should know. Don't meet him. Vince instructed immediately. It's being handled. What does that mean? Kylie asked, her voice tense. It means I'm keeping my promise to you, Vince replied. Justice for Wesley, no matter the cost. After hanging up, Vince drove to a secluded viewpoint overlooking the desert that had been both his sanctuary and weapon. The vast, ancient landscape stretched before him, indifferent to the human dramas playing out upon its surface. His phone buzzed again. A message from Oscar, package secured. Delivery in progress. We'll call with confirmation. Vince closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his choices. In destroying Melody and Trent, in silencing Preston, in reconnecting with Oscar, had he become the very thing he once despised? The desert offered no answer, only the relentless truth that had always defined it. Survive or perish. Adapt or die. There was no room for weakness, no place for forgiveness. And Vince Harlow, once a man who taught others to survive the wilderness, had become its perfect embodiment. Beautiful, dangerous, and utterly unforgiving. Chapter 8. Convergence. The charity gala for wilderness preservation should have been a triumphant moment for Vince. Under the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Sierra Hotel ballroom, Nevada's elite had gathered to support Phantom Ridge Expedition's new conservation initiative. 6 months had passed since the desert incident, and Vince had successfully rebuilt his public image as a dedicated environmentalist and adventure entrepreneur. Yet as he navigated the crowd of admirers and potential investors, Vince felt a familiar tension in his shoulders. Preston Rhodes had been handled by Oscar's connections, currently serving time for probation violations related to conveniently discovered gambling debts. The investigation into Melody and Trent's disappearance had stalled due to lack of evidence and jurisdiction complications. By all accounts, Vince had won. So why did victory feel so hollow? Mr. Harlow, a voice called from behind him. A moment of your time. Vince turned to find himself face to face with a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, her press credentials identifying her as Diana Reeves, investigative reporter for the National Observer. Ms. Reeves, he acknowledged with practiced courtesy. Enjoying the event? Immensely, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though I find myself more interested in your wife's conspicuous absence. 6 months is a long disappearance, even for adventure influencers. My wife's professional commitments are her own, Vince responded smoothly. We've been separated for some time, as I've stated previously. Yes, your official statement. Diana's smile tightened. I've been looking into some inconsistencies in that narrative. For instance, no record of Melody or Trent Westlake leaving the country, despite claims of an international expedition. No communication from either on any platform. No financial activity. Vince maintained his composed expression. I'm not my wife's keeper, Ms. Reeves. Perhaps that contributed to our separation. Perhaps, she conceded. Or perhaps something happened out in that desert 6 months ago. Something involving your father, Oscar Harlow. The mention of his father's name sent a cold jolt through Vince, though he revealed nothing. My father and I are estranged. Have been for years. Interesting, then, that you were seen meeting with him the night Preston Rhodes was arrested. Diana pressed. The same Preston Rhodes who worked for your company and was reportedly the last person to see your wife before her expedition. Before Vince could formulate a response, a commotion near the entrance drew attention. Through the crowd, he spotted a familiar figure, Brooke Kingsley, Trent's sister. She stood scanning the room, her expression determined. Excuse me, Vince said to Diana. Duty calls. He moved quickly through the crowd, intercepting Brooke before she could make a scene. Ms. Kingsley, this is a surprise. Where is my brother? She demanded without preamble, her voice low but intense. I believe he's on assignment overseas, Vince replied, steering her toward a quieter corner. Though we don't exactly keep in touch. Lies, Brooke hissed. I've hired investigators. They found nothing. No trail, no records, nothing. It's like he vanished into thin air. And the last person he contacted was you. That's not accurate, Vince countered calmly. His last assignment with Phantom Ridge was months ago, before he and my wife decided to pursue independent projects. You did something to them, Brooke insisted, her eyes blazing. And I'm going to prove it. From across the room, Vince caught sight of Dom making his way toward them, concern evident in his expression. Simultaneously, he noticed Diana Reeves observing the exchange with keen interest. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Vince needed to contain it. Ms. Kingsley, he said, his voice dropped to a whisper. Making accusations without evidence is dangerously close to slander. I suggest you reconsider your approach. Is that a threat? Brooke challenged. A statement of fact, Vince replied. Now, I can have security escort you out, or you can leave voluntarily. Your choice. Their standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Kylie Porter, elegant in a black evening gown. Everything all right here? She asked, her presence creating an immediate tension with Brooke. Fine, Vince assured her. Ms. Kingsley was just leaving. Brooke's gaze shifted between Vince and Kylie, realization dawning in her eyes. You're working together, she said. This is about Wesley Porter, isn't it? Kylie's composure faltered slightly before she recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. My brother mentioned Wesley before he disappeared, Brooke continued. Said there was complicated history there. And now you two are thick as thieves while my brother is missing? That's not coincidence. Dom finally reached them, positioning himself strategically between Brooke and the others. Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave. This isn't over, Brooke promised as Dom escorted her toward the exit. Not by a long shot. As she departed, Vince noticed Diana Reeves watching intently, her reporter's instinct clearly sensing a story. The carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. We need to talk, Kylie said urgently. Not here. Later that night, in Vince's penthouse overlooking the city, Kylie paced anxiously while Dom secured the premises and checked for surveillance. It's clean, he reported, rejoining them in the living room. But that reporter's been digging deep. She's connected you to Oscar and Preston. It's only a matter of time before she puts more pieces together. And now Trent's sister is involved, Kylie added, collapsing onto the sofa. This is unraveling, Vince. Vince remained calm, pouring himself a whiskey as he considered their options. Nothing concrete has emerged. No evidence ties us to what happened in the desert. Except Preston, Dom reminded him. And your father. Wild cards, both of them. Preston is contained, Vince replied. And Oscar won't talk. It would implicate him as well. Are you sure about that? Kylie challenged. From what you've told me, your father isn't exactly trustworthy. The truth of her statement hung in the air. Oscar Harlow had indeed proven useful in handling Preston, but at a cost. He'd been inserting himself more frequently into Vince's life, leveraging their collaboration as an entry point back into his son's world. And Oscar had his own agenda, always had. We need insurance, Vince decided. Something to neutralize these threats permanently. What kind of insurance? Dom asked. Before Vince could answer, his secure phone rang, the one reserved for critical contacts. The display showed a number he didn't recognize. Harlow, he answered cautiously. Hello, son. Oscar's voice, calm and collected. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Your home isn't secure. Meet me at the old mining site in 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead before Vince could respond. What is it? Kylie asked, noting his expression. My father, Vince replied, already moving toward his secure room where he kept emergency equipment. Says my place is compromised. Wants to meet. It could be a trap, Dom warned. With the heat coming down from that reporter and Trent's sister, Oscar might be looking to cover his tracks. Which is exactly why I need to go, Vince countered. Better to confront the threat directly. Within 30 minutes, Vince was driving through the darkness toward the abandoned mining operation where he'd occasionally met Oscar for sensitive conversations. The remote location, owned through shell companies linked to Oscar's past associates, offered privacy and security, or so he had thought. As he navigated the rough access road, Vince's mind raced. Had Oscar been playing him all along? Was this meeting a setup? The possibility seemed increasingly likely given the timing and Oscar's cryptic warning about his home being compromised. The mining site appeared deserted when he arrived, the dilapidated structures casting eerie shadows in his headlights. Vince parked at a distance, approaching on foot with his hand near the concealed weapon at his waist. Punctual as always, Oscar's voice came from the shadows near the main building. A valuable trait. What's this about? Vince demanded, scanning for potential threats. What do you mean my home is compromised? Oscar emerged, his weathered face half illuminated by the moonlight. That reporter, Diana Reeves, has an informant inside your organization. Someone feeding her information about your desert activities. Oh, your sister, Oscar replied without hesitation. Faye's been talking. The accusation hit Vince like a physical blow. You're lying. Am I? Oscar produced a digital recorder and pressed play. Faye's voice emerged clearly. Can't keep covering for him, Diana. What happened in the desert cross lines? Vince isn't the man I thought he was. Oscar stopped the recording. There's more. Much more. Seems your sisters developed a conscience about what happened to your wife and her boyfriend. How did you get this? Vince demanded. I've been watching Faye since she started acting strange around you, Oscar explained. Father's intuition. When she contacted the reporter, I had people intercept their communications. Vince's mind raced, assessing this new threat. Faye had indeed been distant recently, asking uncomfortable questions about Melody and Trent's fate. He'd attributed it to natural concern, but perhaps there was more. Why tell me this? Vince asked. What do you want? Same thing I've always wanted, Oscar replied. Family. Recognition. My rightful place in your operation. He stepped closer. You built something impressive, son. Something with potential beyond your current vision. With my connections and your legitimate front, we could expand in ways you've never imagined. Criminal ways, Vince stated flatly. Oscar shrugged. Business opportunities with less regulatory oversight. The distinction is meaningless. And if I refuse, then I can't help you with your sister problem, Oscar said simply. Or the reporter. Or Trent's increasingly troublesome sister. Problems have a way of multiplying, son, unless someone with experience handles them. The implication was clear. Oscar was offering to solve these threats permanently in exchange for a partnership. A partnership that would transform Phantom Ridge from a legitimate business into a front for Oscar's criminal enterprises. I need time to think, Vince said, buying space to formulate a counter-strategy. Take 24 hours, Oscar agreed. But remember, the clock is ticking. Your sister's meeting the reporter again tomorrow night. As Vince drove back toward the city, his mind churned with the implications of Oscar's revelation. If Faye was indeed cooperating with Diana Reeves, everything he'd built could crumble. The carefully orchestrated justice for Wesley Porter, the retribution against Melody and Trent, his own freedom, all were at risk. But partnering with Oscar would mean becoming exactly what he'd spent his life avoiding. His father's son in the fullest, darkest sense. When he arrived home, he found Dom waiting with urgent news of his own. "There's been activity on one of the emergency accounts you set up," Dom reported. "Someone accessed the funds from a terminal in Mexico City. Melody or Trent?" Facial recognition confirms it was Trent, Dom said, showing him the security footage. "He's alive, Vince. And if he's resurfaced, then he might be coming back," Vince finished grimly. "Possibly with evidence against us." The walls were closing in from multiple directions. Oscar wanting a criminal partnership. Faye potentially betraying him to a reporter. Trent resurfacing from his enforced exile. Brooke Kingsley making public accusations. The irony wasn't lost on Vince. He had orchestrated a perfect desert punishment for those who betrayed him, only to find himself now surrounded by betrayal on all sides. "What's the play?" Dom asked, his loyalty one of the few constants in this unraveling situation. Vince stared out at the distant desert, visible as a dark void beyond the city lights. The place that had defined him. The place that had taught him its harsh truths. "We go back to the beginning," he said finally. "Back to where it all started." "The desert," Dom nodded in understanding. "The desert," Vince confirmed. "But this time we bring all the players together. Oscar, Faye, even Trent, if we can locate him. One final reckoning. And then what? Then we let the desert decide," Vince said, his expression hardening into something unrecognizable even to himself. "The way it always has." Chapter 9, Judgment. The abandoned research station sat like a fortress in the heart of the desert, its concrete structures bleached pale by years of relentless sun. Once used for classified government weather experiments, it had been decommissioned decades ago and eventually purchased through one of Phantom Ridge's shell companies. Few people knew of its existence. Fewer still could locate it without precise coordinates. It was the perfect location for Vince's final gambit. From the main building's observation room, he surveyed the barren landscape through high-powered binoculars, watching as the first helicopter approached from the east. Right on schedule. "They're here," he announced to Dom, who was monitoring the security systems. "All communications are blocked as requested," Dom confirmed. "No signals in or out except through our control channels." Vince nodded, satisfied. "And our other guests?" "Oscar arrived an hour ago, currently secured in the East Wing. Faye's being brought in on the second transport. We've got a lead on Trent's location in Baja. Extraction team is en route." "And Kylie?" "Declined your invitation," Dom reported. "Said she wants no part of whatever you're planning." "Smart woman," Vince murmured. Of all the players in this drama, Kylie Porter alone seemed to recognize when to walk away. The helicopter landed in the designated area, kicking up swirls of sand. Diana Reeves emerged, escorted by two of Vince's security personnel. They had invited her to an exclusive story about Phantom Ridge's new desert research initiative, a pretense she had eagerly accepted despite her suspicions about Vince. 30 minutes later, the second helicopter arrived carrying Faye, who had been intercepted en route to her scheduled meeting with Diana. Unlike the reporter, Faye understood immediately that this was no ordinary invitation. The look she gave Vince when she was brought into the main room spoke volumes. "What is this, Vince?" she demanded, glancing nervously at Diana Reeves, who sat at a distance, observing their interaction with keen interest. "Family reunion," Vince replied coldly, "with a few additional guests." "You're making a mistake," Faye warned, lowering her voice. "Whatever you think you know." "I know enough," Vince interrupted. "The question is, how much have you told Ms. Reeves about our desert activities?" Faye's silence was confirmation enough. Vince gestured to Dom, who escorted her to a seat across from Diana. The reporter watched this exchange with undisguised fascination, clearly sensing the story expanding beyond her initial expectations. "Mr. Harlow," Diana finally spoke up, "I was promised an exclusive about your research initiative. This seems different." "It is," Vince acknowledged, turning his attention to her. "You've been investigating my wife's disappearance, my father's criminal connections, and events that occurred in this desert 6 months ago. Today, you get your exclusive, the complete story." but on my terms. Diana's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise before she composed herself. And those terms are, "You listen first," Vince stated. "Then I'll answer your questions. Once. After that, you decide what story you publish, if any." "That's not how journalism works," Diana objected. "It is today," Vince replied with finality. "Because this isn't just about a story for you. It's about survival for all of us." Before Diana could respond, Dom signaled from the security console. "Third transport incoming." "It's Oscar." Oscar Harlow entered the room with the confident stride of a man who believed himself to be in control of the situation. He took in the assembled group with a calculating gaze before settling on Vince. "Interesting gathering, son," he remarked, "though I don't recall agreeing to an audience." "Plans change," Vince replied. "Have a seat." Oscar remained standing. "I prefer to maintain tactical advantages when possible." "As do I," Vince countered, nodding to Dom, who activated a control panel on the wall. Metal shutters descended over the windows while reinforced security doors sealed the room's exits. "Please, sit." Recognizing the shift in power dynamics, Oscar complied, choosing a position that allowed him to observe everyone. "Now we wait for our final guest," Vince announced. "Trent Westlake," Diana surmised, her reporter's instinct connecting the dots. "You found him. He'll be joining us shortly," Vince confirmed. "In the meantime, let me tell you all a story about desert justice." Over the next hour, Vince methodically laid out the events that had led them to this moment. He revealed Melody and Trent's betrayal, their plan to eliminate him for control of his company, and the evidence he had gathered against them. He explained their connection to Wesley Porter's death and the elaborate punishment he had orchestrated in the desert. Throughout his narrative, he watched the varied reactions of his audience. Diana documented everything with professional detachment, though her expression betrayed occasional shock at the more brutal details. Faye alternated between shame and defiance, especially when Vince described the psychological tactics he had employed against Melody and Trent. Oscar, unsurprisingly, listened with something resembling pride. "So you left them in the desert with false identities and clean financial records," Diana clarified when Vince finished. "Essentially erasing their previous lives. They received better than they had planned for me," Vince replied without remorse. "And far better than Wesley Porter received. And now Trent has resurfaced," Diana continued, "potentially threatening to expose your vigilante justice. Hence our gathering today," Vince confirmed. "The loose ends are converging, Ms. Reeves. Including you." The implication hung heavily in the air. Diana glanced toward the sealed exits, her professional composure faltering slightly. "If you're planning to silence us all," she said carefully, "bringing us together seems counterproductive." "If that were my intention, there would be more efficient methods," Vince replied. "No, I brought you here for a different purpose." At that moment, Dom received another alert. "Final transport approaching. ETA 5 minutes." The tension in the room escalated as they awaited Trent's arrival. When he was finally escorted in, thinner, weathered, but very much alive, his presence completed the circle of players in Vince's orchestrated drama. Trent's eyes widened as he took in the assembled group. "What is this?" he demanded hoarsely. "The reckoning," Vince answered simply, gesturing to the last empty chair. Once Trent was seated, Vince moved to the center of the room, commanding everyone's attention. "Each of you represents a threat to what I've built," he began. "Diana, with your investigation. Faye, with your betrayal. Oscar, with your criminal aspirations for my company. And Trent, with your unexpected resurrection." He paused, surveying each face. Conventional wisdom would suggest eliminating these threats permanently. "Then why haven't you?" Trent challenged, his voice strained. "Because the desert taught me something about justice," Vince replied. "True justice isn't about elimination. It's about balance. Consequences properly aligned with actions." He moved to a control panel and activated a large screen on the far wall. It displayed a digital countdown clock set to 60 minutes. In 1 hour, this facility's location and purpose will be broadcast to federal authorities, along with comprehensive evidence of various crimes associated with it, Vince explained. These crimes include Oscar's numerous illegal operations, details of Wesley Porter's death, and the forced exile of Melody and Trent. Oscar's expression darkened dangerously. You're exposing all of us, including yourself? Unless the appropriate parties depart before the countdown concludes, Vince clarified. Transportation is waiting outside. Enough for everyone except one person. Who stays behind? Faye asked, understanding dawning in her eyes. The person most deserving of desert justice, Vince replied. That's for you all to decide collectively. The implication was clear. They would have to choose a sacrifice to remain behind and face the consequences when authorities arrived. The others would escape with their freedom intact. This is insane, Diana objected. You can't expect us to. I expect you to apply the same ruthless judgment to each other that you've been willing to apply to others, Vince interrupted. Oscar, you've sacrificed countless people to protect your criminal enterprises. Faye, you were willing to sacrifice me to ease your conscience. Trent, you sacrificed Wesley Porter for fame and profit. And Ms. Reeves, you've sacrificed truth for sensationalism throughout your career. He gestured to the countdown. You have 1 hour to decide who deserves to face justice most. Choose wisely. With that, Vince nodded to Dom, who followed him from the room through a hidden door that sealed behind them, leaving the 4 occupants to their deliberations. In a facility's secure monitoring room, Vince and Dom watched on multiple screens as chaos erupted. Accusations flew, alliances formed and dissolved within minutes, and true natures were revealed under pressure. Oscar immediately attempted to assert dominance through intimidation. Diana tried to broker reasonable discussion while secretly recording everything on a hidden device. Faye appealed to moral principles. Trent, broken by his months in exile, oscillated between desperate pleas and bitter accusations. You think they'll actually choose? Dom asked as the minutes ticked by. They'll have to, Vince replied. Survival instinct will force a decision. Indeed, as the countdown approached the 30-minute mark, the discussion became more focused, more pragmatic. Oscar argued that Trent should stay behind, having already died once in the public eye. Trent countered that Oscar's criminal history made him the obvious choice. Faye suggested Diana, reasoning that a reporter would receive the most lenient treatment from authorities. Diana proposed they all refuse to choose, forcing Vince's hand. They're missing the point, Vince observed. This isn't about escaping consequences. It's about acknowledging who truly deserves them. When only 15 minutes remained, a shift occurred. Faye, who had been quieter during the most recent arguments, suddenly stood and addressed the group. It should be Vince, she declared. He orchestrated everything. Wesley's death cover-up, Melody and Trent's exile, this entire situation. He's the one who deserves to face justice. Interesting development, Dom commented, watching Vince's reaction. Expected, Vince replied calmly. She's not wrong from her perspective. As the countdown fell below 10 minutes, the discussion had transformed into a unified front against the absent Vince. Even Oscar eventually agreed, his survival instinct outweighing family loyalty. Their collective decision refused to sacrifice one of their own and instead demand Vince take responsibility for his actions. When only 5 minutes remained, Vince finally re-entered the room. The 4 participants fell silent, their unified stance evident in their positioning. We've reached a decision, Faye announced. We choose you, Vince. You should be the one to stay behind. Vince absorbed this without surprise. An interesting choice. Unfortunately, not one of the available options. This was your game, Oscar growled. Your test of justice. Face the consequences of your own actions. Oh, I am, Vince assured him, but not in the way you imagine. He nodded to Dom, who had entered behind him and now sealed the door once more. The countdown you've been watching isn't for the authorities' notification. That already happened 30 minutes ago. Shocked expressions met this revelation. Then what? Diana began. It's the facility's lockdown protocol, Vince explained. In 3 minutes, this room will be sealed for 72 hours. No entry, no exit. Emergency rations and water are stored in the cabinet to your right. Enough for one person to survive comfortably. For people. He shrugged. It will be challenging. You're leaving us here? Faye gasped. Your own sister? The sister who betrayed me to the press? Vince countered. Yes, along with the father who abandoned me, the man who tried to kill me, and the reporter who would destroy everything I built. The authorities will find us, Diana asserted. Eventually, Vince agreed. After they processed the evidence I provided about Oscar's operations, Trent's role in Wesley Porter's death, and various other matters. Evidence that notably excludes any mention of Faye or Diana Reeves. Understanding dawned in Oscar's eyes. You're giving the authorities just enough to satisfy them without revealing your own involvement. Precisely, Vince confirmed. A careful balance of justice and self-preservation. The countdown passed the 2-minute mark. Desperation filled the room as the 4 occupants realized the truth of their situation. You can't do this, Faye pleaded. It's inhuman. It's desert justice, Vince corrected. Harsh but appropriate. The strong survive. The weak perish. The guilty face consequences proportionate to their crimes. And what about your guilt? Trent demanded. What consequences do you face? Living with what I've become, Vince replied, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. Knowing that in punishing betrayal, I became something worse than those who betrayed me. For the first time since the desert ordeal began, Vince allowed his mask to slip completely, revealing the toll his vengeance had taken on his own humanity. In that moment, his resemblance to Oscar was unmistakable. The same cold calculation, the same unflinching cruelty disguised as justice. You're more my son than you ever wanted to admit, Oscar observed, a twisted pride in his voice. Yes, Vince acknowledged. And that's my punishment. With 1 minute remaining, Vince turned to leave. Diana made a final desperate appeal. What about Melody? Where is she in all this? Vince paused at the threshold. Melody made her choice months ago. She chose survival over loyalty, over truth. A cold smile touched his lips. A choice you 4 now face yourselves. As the door sealed behind Vince and Dom, the countdown reached 0. Automatic systems engaged, locking the facility's secure room for the programmed 72 hours. Outside, they made their way to the waiting helicopter. Will they survive? Dom asked as they lifted off, the research station diminishing beneath them. Depends on whether they're smarter than their base instincts, Vince replied. Oscar might have the survival skills, but the others won't trust him. Faye has the moral compass to suggest cooperation, but lacks the force to implement it. Trent is broken already, and Diana cares more about the story than the people in it. You've thought of everything, Dom observed. As usual. Not everything, Vince admitted, gazing out at the vast desert below. I never anticipated becoming this version of myself. The helicopter banked eastward towards civilization. Behind them, the abandoned research station stood isolated in the unforgiving landscape, a monument to Vince's meticulous retribution. Within its walls, for people faced the same brutal choice Vince had confronted months earlier. What price they were willing to pay for survival, and what parts of their humanity they would sacrifice along the way. 3 days later, when authorities finally breached the sealed room following the anonymous tip and coordinates Vince had provided, they found only 3 survivors. The desert had claimed its final victim, Oscar Harlow, though whether through violence, self-sacrifice, or simply the harsh math of resource allocation remained unclear. The survivors told conflicting stories. Vince received the news of his father's death without visible emotion. By then, he had already implemented the final phase of his plan, the dissolution of Phantom Ridge expeditions, the liquidation of his assets, and his own disappearance into a carefully constructed new identity. The desert had taught him its ultimate lesson. True survival sometimes meant walking away from everything you had built, everything you had become. Starting over not as an act of cowardice, but as the only path to redemption. One person received a message from Vince before he vanished, Kylie Porter. A single line of text, sent through an untraceable channel. Justice is done. Wesley can rest now. So can I. Somewhere in the vastness of the world, Vince Harlow began again, carrying with him the harsh wisdom of the desert and the knowledge that he had become the very thing